Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicoast. Today is January 11th, 2018, and this is episode 68. Happy New Year. Politicoast is your source for West Coast Canadian politics. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever you found us. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, where we're at PoliticoastPod, and support the show at patreon.com/Politicoast.
I'm Scott.
And I'm Ian. We're kicking off our first regular 2018 episode, talking about a political shakeup here in Vancouver, the ongoing controversies with Andrew Scheer and Lynn Beyak, our usual quick takes, and we're going to finish off today with a new segment, the Best of BC Poly. As always, we have to thank our premier sponsors, Lindsay Teds and Blake Hodson, for helping make this show possible. And if you haven't already, go back and check out the holiday special that we released last week. It's a special deep dive into the politics and military strategy and tactics of the Star Wars universe. I watched the prequels again for you people. Don't let that be in vain. And if that's not enough, you can listen to our entire over 2-hour conversation, unedited, with Joe Fulgham on our Patreon page at patreon.com/Politicoast. And the other thing that's new is over the holidays, I spent a bit of that Patreon money and got us a better theme and just rebuilt our website from the ground up. So go check it out at politicos.ca and enjoy the shiny new responsive theme that we have. For segment 1, Gregor's off to a happier planet. The big announcement yesterday that was somewhat unexpected, mainly because he'd spent most of the fall reassuring everyone that he was going to run again, is that Mayor Gregor Robertson is not going to seek re-election this fall. He made one of the hardest decisions of his life and wrote this long Facebook post that we'll link to in the show notes, where he says basically that he's not running again. He, I guess, just took time over the holidays to talk this over with family and friends, and
possibly the political strategists
probably
told him he was not likely to win the next election.
Yeah, it's been a rough couple months for Vision, especially with the by-election last year. So this wasn't unexpected, other than him saying he wouldn't do it. But it also is the perfect time where there's still enough time that Vision can try and find a new savior and maybe make a go of it.
Yeah, but that, of course, leads to the question of, does anyone want to be Vision's Kim Campbell?
Well, there's still a couple people who are sticking around to run again, namely Raymond Louie and Heather Deal, but it sounds like almost everyone else on their council team is taking this opportunity to seek alternative career choices. Tim Stevenson just today added his name to Andrea Reimer, who'd announced in the fall, and Jeff Meggs, who jumped up to the Premier's office last summer. And that just kind of leaves Kerry Jang to decide whether he wants to fight one last battle or maybe go out on a high like Gregor just did. In his going away announcement, Gregor tried to play up the positives, and I think there were positives for the Vision Vancouver mayorship. One thing that's actually quite interesting is by the end of his third term here in October, he will actually be the longest consecutive run as mayor in Vancouver's history. At least he says that, and I have no reason to doubt that, but a decade as mayor is a pretty transformative time. The things he trumpets up are becoming the city of reconciliation, working on becoming greenest city, the 2010 games, which he more implemented rather than planned.
Yeah, he kind of took over and put it over the finish line.
But they went well for an Olympics, which are usually a shit show.
Yeah, I believe actually the Vancouver 2010 were one of the few Olympics that actually come out in the black.
Yeah, and there's some credit to be given to him for there. He also talks about not shying away from the toughest issues and not backing down on opening homeless shelters, warming centers, modular supportive housing to help most vulnerable residents, though he misses the point that we're still in the midst of a giant homeless crisis. He talks about Vancouver having done more to protect and build affordable housing than any city in the country, but just because you've done more doesn't mean you've done enough. It's kind of a low bar. Going forward, for the last 10 months, he talks about how he wants to keep working to secure money for the Broadway subway, get more affordable housing, and more vibrant public spaces like the new Arbutus Greenway, which is actually right near where I live here, and I enjoy it, and the Jim Diva plaza in Davie Village. And those are good things. I think both of those are big victories. Actually, getting the Arbutus corridor away from CN Rail is a pretty historic win for the city of Vancouver after the rail company held on to that with no purpose in mind. At the same time, like, lots of unanswered questions around affordability, and the fact we're in the midst of a crisis is probably the biggest black mark on his record.
Yeah, and that's been the single biggest issue facing Vancouver for the past decade, and that's also the big black mark on his record, is that he didn't do a huge amount towards solving it, and he spent a lot of time blaming the provincial government for not acting well. He himself didn't do very much with the policy levers he had at his disposal.
Well, and what a lot of people are pointing out on Twitter and elsewhere is now he has basically friends in Victoria and in Ottawa, people he considers friends. They've all been pictured together smiling. Like, he's on good relations with Justin Trudeau. He's on good relations with John Horgan. And now he's saying goodbye? Like, it makes sense when you think he can't win again, and that seems like the safe bet. But if you want to get things through, you kind of want to work with people you have good relationships with. And it almost begs the question, is something else lined up?
I have heard rumors that he might take a shot at the federal riding of Vancouver Centre, which is Heidi Fry's seat, and she'll be leaving politics soon, I believe.
And he'd be going to the Liberals in that case? The federal Liberals?
Yes.
He in the past was a provincial New Democrat,
which
technically
means you're
makes
a federal one, but there's been so many times where, because we don't have a direct analog to the federal Liberals here, people who kind of sit on the left edge of the federal Liberal Party, yeah, they're New Democrats here, federal Liberals, and they just jump ship when they move to federal politics.
Well, and I saw people trying to make the question, and I saw people trying to ask if, maybe he was eyeing the premiership, which was the weirdest suggestion I'd heard, because
that makes no sense, because not only there just been an election and nobody's going to be taking the premiership anytime soon, he's a New Democrat provincially, so he'd have to wait till the current premier loses power, then come in, try and steal the leadership, and then win an election. It's not a short-term plan.
More realistically, he could try for a seat in the legislature again, try and knock off Sam Sullivan or someone else in the city of Vancouver. But even then, the election won't be for a while, maybe. Maybe he's got sights set on a job in the premier's office or somewhere in Victoria working with the NDP or the new government. Or maybe he legitimately just wanted to spend more time with his kids. There's nothing wrong with that and wanting to be more family focused. But I guess we'll have to see what he does after October. But in the meantime, he gets to probably have a bit more fun being mayor since he's not worried about re-election. I know some of his first early years in the seat were a bit tense. He was caught on a hot mic at one point talking about fucking hacks on the NPA or something like that, and was basically the partisan foil to the partisans of the NPA. But it's a mixed record, I guess. So if Gregor's out and Vision's maybe on the outs with so many people stepping aside, what's going on over at the NPA then?
Yeah, so as we previously mentioned, Councillor George Affleck has decided not to run, and he had the highest profile of the four NPA councillors. So that's a bit of a loss for them. And we know Bremner and Dejanova are going to be running again. Elizabeth Ball, I don't think it's actually announced one way or the other, but barring deciding to leave politics for personal reasons, I can't see much point in pulling out now, because the NPA is in theory well positioned to take advantage of Vision's weakness here.
Since the by-election and even before, people have been pointing at this election as the NPA's to lose. So if they can put their party together in a sensible form, appoint someone who's moderate and reasonable, not way young, but the names being thrown around are Kirk LaPointe again, who ran last time. Hector Bremner's name has actually come up a couple times as a mayoral candidate now, which is a quick jump from council, but if no one else is up for the job, you have to then pull someone from outside council.
Yeah, that would be a pretty quick jump up.
But then there's also this Glenn Chernin you discovered.
He also announced he wants to seek the mayoral candidacy for the NPA. He was formerly a council candidate for the now defunct, I believe, Cedar Party, which was kind of out there to the right of the NPA, and as far as I can tell, basically spent the last election bitching about developers and City Hall. He's kind of more on that, just the stop all the change, NIMBY end of the NPA base there. And if he does succeed in getting the nomination, it would be kind of a departure from the tact the NPA has been taking within the last year or so, following Bremner's nomination and the much more change-oriented platform they ran on during the by-election.
Besides that, I haven't heard any other names on the right-ish side of the Vancouver spectrum being bandied about. I'm sure more will be coming out soon because NPA's got a live mayoral nomination race going. And now we'll get to see Vision's. The only names hinting at Vision's mayoral nod right now is Councillor Raymond Louis. But who knows? Maybe we could see someone from a different level of politics jump in.
Yeah, we might see someone who not currently sitting right now try and seek the Vision nomination, which might actually be what happens because someone could see it as their chance to try and make a name for themselves or whatever. But it's going to be an uphill slog regardless of whoever gets it. And I'm not sure you're going to see one of the big names out there trying to want to hitch themselves to a sinking ship.
That said, Vision does have more of a party apparatus than anyone else active in Vancouver right now. The NPA is catching up from having a rough couple years, but on the left you have one city that's trying to build up something, Cope, that's MIA effectively, and the Greens that are doing their own thing and kind of all over the place on political issues from time to time. The most successful left candidate in Vancouver recently was Jean Swanson, who ran pointedly as an independent, got the Cope nomination, but I don't know if that actually helped in any way.
Well, I think she got the Cope endorsement.
Yeah, you're right. She got the Cope endorsement. And I think it was more helpful that Cope didn't run anyone than actively endorsed her. So now going forward, there's the question of, well, who's going to be the left unity candidate? Because I think they recognize you can't have this Judy Graves, Jean Swanson split again. All indications seem to be that Jean Swanson would run again for council. Now, I haven't seen anyone really say seriously that she wants to be mayor or wants to run for mayorship.
I've seen speculation that she would seek it, but it's hard to say whether or not she's going to go for that. But I think there's a very good chance we'll see her in the next election for one of the positions or another.
What I'm seeing more seriously, or at least from some activists, is a draft Libby Davies campaign. Libby Davies is a long-time NDP MP stalwart of East Vancouver. I think she was deputy leader for a long time and represented the left side of the NDP, always being very East Van, to be honest. She's 64 now, so not young, but not as old as the President of the United States. So, could still put in a good few years as mayor.
So what you're saying is Libby Davis is slightly better than Donald Trump.
Yeah, if age is the only factor in consideration. I think Libby's got a huge understanding of poverty issues and affordability issues just based on her work in the downtown east side over decades. I don't know what else she'd bring on the municipal issues. Her time was mostly at the federal stage, so it'll be interesting to see if she comes out for or against. But the people I'm seeing on this draft Libby Davies campaign were the same people who were basically on the draft Jean Swanson campaign and helped get that going. So maybe it'll happen. If it does, maybe it'll be another independent push with a independent mayoral candidate and an independent Jean Swanson on council. And maybe that's how parties in Vancouver die, is just the left gives up on them and people just start going against parties. There's also the question of whether Adrienne Carr will let ambition get the better of her and decide to run for mayor. And given how well the Greens actually did in the municipal by-election, she could surprise people.
Yeah, it would be a pretty big step up from going from one seat to mayor. But, crazier things have happened.
Well, they took every seat they ran for in the by-election except for council. They ran 3 people for school board. They got all of them. They could easily get a majority on Parks board because people just go, Parks, Green Party, makes sense. And no one really knows what the Parks board does other than keeps the parks clean.
Something about whales.
Yeah.
Oh, and also balloons, because we can't have balloons in public spaces.
Well, they only proposed that motion. I don't know how far it went. But yeah, we were thinking last year that we maybe spent more time on Vancouver and municipal issues than maybe listeners outside the city of Vancouver would care about.
Yeah, I know a few of my friends in Victoria who listen to this said that we're maybe spending a little too much time on local issues.
I was thinking, maybe we'll refocus a bit more on BC and federal politics in 2018. But now we have a super interesting election here in the city of Vancouver. And even when I move to Burnaby later this spring, I'm still going to be paying attention to Vancouver politics because it tends to matter more than even Burnaby politics, which is pretty much Derek Corrigan's going to win again, like most small town races.
Well, Burnaby's not exactly a small town.
Yeah, but
It's the third largest municipality in the...
Even Surrey's races don't tend to be that competitive, and Surrey's are arguably consequential. But if anyone has insight or wants to hear more about the goings-ons of a specific municipality, let us know on Twitter at PoliticosPod, and we'll try and find something out about Revelstoke politics, for example.
And we'll get started out by pivoting to our second segment. So the Senate's version of that old crazy racist relative that you have to deal with every couple holidays was in the news again. It's Senator Lynn Beyak found herself in yet more hot water over her, kind of terrible views about residential schools and First Nations communities.
Well, this time it wasn't her personal views. It was the fact she was using her Senate website to post the terrible views of other Canadians who felt the need to write her and tell her how Indigenous people are terrible and would burn down Hutterite farms, whereas Hutterites would work hard and weird, crazy racist, like hardcore racist stuff. I'm not even going to get into it. Not the that's kind of borderline, just straight up.
Ooh, you just actually said that, didn't you? Ugh.
And this all came to light because Robert Jago, who I believe is a Coast Salish, he's definitely Indigenous, I believe he's Coast Salish, he had a piece for The Walrus going, why is she still got these up? Is Andrew Scheer not going to do anything? And Scheer was asked about this by the Globe and Mail, and suddenly Beyak was no longer in caucus.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out here, this isn't some blog she had where she posted these. These were on her Senate webpage.
The one paid for by us through tax dollars and all that. Now, Scheer's version of the events are that he asked Beyak to remove the racist letters. She declined, and he kicked her out. And his statement, many pulled apart for going, so was it the insubordination or the actual racist? He does call the letters racist and the emails racist, but it was the...
What was Scheer's big problem here? Was it her not following his directions, or was it the actual content of the letters?
Now, Beyak disputes all this and says Scheer never actually asked her to remove these. Not that I think she would have, but now she's free to be an independent and, as the Beaverton just said, tell us what she really thinks.
Yeah, and it's probably a 50-50 chance she's launching a Patreon next month.
Well, she's a senator. She collects 6 figures. She doesn't need to get the extra income. She's cushy for another, I think it's 8 years or more.
2024 is when she has to retire.
Another 6 years. This all comes after another interview Scheer did with the Globe and Mail on January 2nd, where he described himself as more tolerant than Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. He also said he won't march in Pride because he supports the LGBTQ community in other ways.
Well, he did actually point out basically taking issue with Chechnya's treatment of LGBTQ people, which, let's just put in context here, they have concentration camps. So we're talking, concentration camps are bad. Yeah, that's...
Yeah, he's basically saying,
it.
I don't literally want to round up and kill the gays. I don't need to march in the parade. My level of support is I don't want to literally round them up.
Yeah, so he sits somewhere between, I'll show up to a pride parade and let's not do the concentration camp thing.
Now, the Globe and Mail points out he voted against same-sex marriage back in the day, but the Conservative Party have switched their tune on that finally. But Scheer's tolerance comes from his willingness to accept anti-abortion views within his party and other, I guess, views on social issues.
It rings a little hollow. This time last year when the leadership race was in full swing, I lost count of the number of times I saw someone saying, oh, Michael Chong doesn't belong in the Conservative Party because he thinks carbon taxes are a decent idea to address climate change.
Well, see, within Conservatives, Scott, you can have sharp disagreements over whether women should have reproductive freedoms, but carbon taxes are clearly evil. See, this is the thing. Like, once Conservatives get onto social issues, it's just bad for them. This entire first 2 weeks of the month, it's not even that. It's only the 11th. It's not even been 2 weeks of 2018, and they've already had multiple news stories of just basically egg on the face of, oh, look, it's a bunch of dinosaurs, talking like it's, well, Beyak was literally quoting 19th century racist stuff last year, so, but I guess she's not a conservative anymore.
Well, no, she's not in caucus anymore. She's still a conservative. So, I mean, she hasn't reached like Daryl Pleckus level of going
Sinful.
against the party and sinfulness.
True.
Yeah. I mean, if she seeks the speakership, yeah, maybe then all bets are off.
And what becomes more interesting about the Beyak story is there's a person who came out this last week, Garnet Angie Conib. I hopefully didn't butcher that too much. He's a residential school survivor and Order of Canada winner, so not just some guy. He told CBC's As It Happens that he emailed Scheer months ago about Beyak's letters and asked why they were on her website. And I guess didn't get a reply. Maybe it didn't cross Scheer's desk, but someone would have seen that email at some point and just went, nah, let's not worry about this potentially embarrassing situation.
And yeah, that's actually one of the interesting things about this is got to be like the fourth or fifth time where there's some eruption in the Conservative Party and it's taken Scheer weeks to get a hold of it and start taking action. And it's one of those things you just got to wonder, is he like not on top of this or doesn't think these are big deals or seems to just not have a good sense of how Canadians will react to them. If this had happened 5 years ago when Harper was running the show, you can bet your ass like someone from the PMO the next hour would be calling Lynn Beyak and telling her to sort her shit out.
Yeah, the crisis communications have just evaporated. And that's not to say he had to kick her out, but he had to do something. And instead he kind of sat on his hands for a couple days until Globe and Mail came calling and he finally went, oh, I guess I should deal with that thing finally. And I'm saying he wouldn't necessarily have had to kick her out if he doubled down on hate. This is the guy who ran on the I want to defund campuses that don't defend free speech position, which was later exposed to be the free speech that I want them to hear. Like, obviously not Nazis.
Yeah, and in this case, I think by taking her out of caucus, he actually has defunded her.
So he's trying to square all these circles and both appeal to the rebel media contingent and that section, but also not be too blatant about it. And it's playing with fire, and he's singeing his clothes all day long by sometimes just forgetting he's playing with fire, I guess. Then on the other side of the aisle and people calling for Beyak's head, essentially, the Independent Senate group, which is the growing group of senators who have no political affiliation. It's mostly ex-liberals who Trudeau kicked out of caucus when he was third-party leader, which now is seeming like a better and better idea. Like, he's having trouble getting some legislation through the Senate, but liberal senators don't embarrass him because there aren't liberal senators. If Scheer kicked everyone out of caucus in the Senate, he could actually deal with some of these. So the Independent Senate group is calling for a probe by the Senate ethics officer into whether publishing these letters represents a misuse of taxpayer funds. It seems like a bit of a red herring wild goose hunt. Mix my metaphors. It's the least they can do. I guess they don't have a lot of power to just boot her from the Senate unless they get maybe a strong vote. No one really knows how the Senate works.
I think there's a sorting hat involved. It's confusing.
The other thing that's come up is a couple First Nations around Thunder Bay actually started a petition. I think in October is when it was launched, but it's been reignited this last week. And it's on the parliamentary e-petition page, and it calls for Beyak to be kicked out of the Senate. Now, any petition that gets over 500 e-signatures certified on there, which this has, I think it had 2,000 a couple days ago, but it's probably well above that now, has to be responded to by the federal government. So this means one of Trudeau's ministers will have to write the letter of, yeah, we think she's terrible. Too bad we can't do anything. If only the senator would have the courage to take herself out of the Senate. And that's one thing Stephen Marr in Maclean's actually suggests might be a more productive solution for Beyak, besides just using her as a learning opportunity about how racist our country's history with Indigenous peoples is if she really wants to see how popular her views are, maybe she could step down and actually run for a seat instead of sitting on literally a throne of privilege. Lynn Beyak actually has run before, twice in Ontario for the Progressive Conservative Party, and both times coming up short. So maybe elected office is just not for her.
Yeah, well, Patrick Brown is smart enough not to touch her with a 10-foot pole if she wants to see if third time's a charm at provincial politics.
And I can't imagine Scheer at this point is going to let her run in 2019. So overall, this is pretty good news for the Liberals and NDP, who get to spend their days not talking about ethics scandals on the Liberals' part, or not talking about how Jagmeet Singh doesn't have a seat, and instead just pointing and laughing at the Conservative Party, who are also stuck in this infighting of, like, how many racists do you allow in the party?
Finally, the answer does not seem to be 0.
Well, for our first quick take, the BC government has decided to increase the homeowner grant threshold. This is the small amount of money every homeowner in BC is given whose home is under a certain bar. That bar was 1.6 million in 2017, and it's now 1.65 million. The government's rationale for this is that they want to make sure the same percentage of people who got the grant last year will get it this year. But this means hundreds of millions of dollars, much of which is going to people who are pretty well off, because if you have $1 million home, do you really need $570 more dollars?
Well, not only that, it's $1 million homes are $600,000 under the threshold here. Past guest of the show, Tom Davidoff, called this a stupid waste of money, and I think that's being a little polite. This is one of the dumbest fucking things the government can spend money on, and I'm legitimately surprised the NDP decided to double down on this one, because basically anyone who cares at all about the housing issues looking at this and going dude, seriously, you're going to up the amount of money you're going to spend on subsidizing people with $1 million assets?
As far as I can tell, every economist, left and right, agrees with that. There are lots of different ways to solve the affordability issues, and none of them involve giving $1 million home. And to be clear, most homes in BC fall under this threshold. The only ones that don't tend to be in West Vancouver or the west end of the city of Vancouver here. But I think this is mostly just a bit of status quoism. The increase is actually pretty marginal, but it's mostly just to keep with
I want to see
the same policy.
Yeah, I want to see the thing scrapped, but I don't think the NDP did a cover their asses on the status quoism when they decide to up it when they didn't have to. And it's a stupid policy. It's a waste of money. $1 billion could go to so much more useful stuff. Maybe
we'll get some ambitious ideas when the budget comes out in a couple months. And maybe one great idea there would be 2018's the last year we do this.
Yeah.
But let's not be too optimistic.
Well, if anything, what they've signaled so far is they're going to try and give a renter's grant. So I'll just throw out a bunch of other money. But it's less money, but it was $400 rather than the $570, which is what this starts at. But I did see a lot of pushback against this, and I think the NDP needs to deliver something big in the fall budget because people have already started to lose patience with this, and this was yet another straw on the camel's back of people's annoyance with the NDP for not doing more on the housing issue quicker. A couple days ago, Gary Mason at the Globe published an interesting article suggesting that Michael Lee, of all people, has massively outperformed all the other Liberal candidates in terms of signing up new members. This was largely people have told him that this is what they've heard, so there's a little secondhand there, but the article claims that he's done more signups than
the other four Liberal MLAs in the race.
Which is interesting because he's a relative newcomer to elected office, having only just acquired his seat in the last election and wasn't considered a front runner in the leadership race, but did get his name mentioned as a possible come from behind candidate. And if these rumors end up being true, could be quite the sign for how things are going to shake out.
The membership deadline was December 29th, and so that's why we're starting to get these kind of leaks now. And Gary Mason's a pretty good journalist at the Globe and Mail, well known for covering BC politics. And I imagine his sources, who in this case undoubtedly include Michael Lee, but he's probably got whispers with all of the other campaigns. So I don't doubt that this is true, that Michael Lee has signed up more people. What Mason does point out is it's not just new members who vote. And often, as we've seen in the two leadership races last year with the Conservatives and the NDP at the federal level, new members don't always turn up.
Yeah, and in fact, that was particularly true in the case of the Conservatives, because Andrew Scheer basically spent no time trying to sign up new members, and where everyone else was running out trying to get new signups, he went to the people who were already there and spent the extra time trying to build support among the existing membership.
And so the BC Liberals have about 60,000 members now, and about half of those are new. And so out of those, the 30,000 existing are your likely to vote ones, and your 30,000 new ones are you got to work to not just have them signed up, but then get them to sign up again. At the same time, you have Mason here saying that Wilkinson and Sam Sullivan were actually some of the worst performing in
Sam
terms of signing
Sullivan's
up.
not a surprise. His campaign's been a little anemic, and I don't think even he expects to win. He's out there for kind of the issues raising, I think, more than anything. But Wilkinson was considered to be, one of the front runners here, and if he comes in near the bottom, that's not a great sign for him.
Unless, of course, he's able to sway the existing membership. The other thing I found interesting in this article by Mason is the suggestion there's a anyone but Watts campaign building, and that can lead to candidates hinting at to fully endorsing to their supporters, hey, vote so-and-so number 2. So Todd Stone could say, vote Michael Lee or Andrew Wilkinson second because we can't let Diane Watts take over our party.
I'm not sure if it's so much the case that there's a strong, organized, oh, come on, we can't have her be in charge of this campaign. It's more, I think, that she hasn't caught fire, I guess, with the party and just hasn't really connected with the BC Liberal membership in a way that people want to go for. I've seen a lot of stuff about how disappointing her campaign's been, but I haven't seen a huge amount on it would be a disaster if we elected her.
She does have the name recognition more so than a lot of the other people running, and that does give her a bit of an advantage among the people who probably represent the majority of the membership who aren't paying that close attention. So people who will probably get their ballot and go, oh, Diane Watts, yeah, she was a mayor of Surrey, and then go from there. And so it's really up to the others to try to make the case that she hasn't run a good campaign, and therefore she wouldn't make a good leader or potential premier. That said, we'll probably get full membership numbers out from other campaigns soon, or the party might release them. I don't know how it works for the BC Liberals. The other thing to watch, as always, is the fundraising numbers. If we can get a look at those to know not just how many people they've signed up, but how much do people actually support them and how much cross support is there. But maybe we won't know until voting day next month who's going to be the next leader of the BC Liberals.
Yeah, so voting is happening the first weekend of February. As we already said, membership deadline's closed, so going into that final stretch where it's all about convincing the people to show up and vote. The last debate is going to be the 23rd, and it's hosted here in Vancouver. And yeah, we'll have to see. It's going to be an interesting one to watch because we only have kind of hints at where the standings are because there just hasn't been a huge amount of polling out there. Although I've been called twice since I bought a membership like 2 days before the end of the deadline. And since then, yeah, I've been the recipient of 2 polling calls on that one. Although I suspect they're mostly internal polls rather than the release to the general public polls done by the main polling companies.
But if anyone wants to give us some money, we're happy to contract a polling firm to try to get some numbers out there, although we don't have access to a good list. So
yeah, new Patreon goal.
Yeah. Well, in other BC politics news, a Oddfellows team of BC NDP strategist Bill Thielman, former Attorney General Susan Anton for the BC Liberals, and Bob Plekas, a former public servant. I'm not sure if he's related to Daryl in any way, but these 3 have gotten together to team up for a no campaign to the proportional representation referendum, and they've created the No BC Proportional Representation Society, a new nonprofit, and they're going to be campaigning for the no side. They've put out some statements, and they said that switching to proportional representation would ironically empower party bosses and make governments less accountable.
Says the party insiders.
And they also say proportional representation will hurt rural voters and allow extremist parties to rise. And ironically, I like that they have said in a few statements that proportional representation leads to unstable governments where we don't get nice, clear majorities.
Did they sleep through the summer?
Yeah, and we were counting. 3 of the last 5 federal elections have been minorities as well.
Yeah, and as America unfortunately showed in their most recent election, it also doesn't prevent extremists from getting into power either.
This has also led a friend of the pod, David Mosscrop, on Twitter to spend this past week getting angry and passionate about being in favor of electoral reform. He's challenged the 3 of them, any of the 3 of them, to basically a debate anytime, any place, which they haven't responded to yet. I'd pay to watch that. Hell, we'll host it if any of them want to come on the show. But otherwise, there doesn't seem to be an organized or coalesced yes side yet. But part of that might just be the fact there's no question on the table or even a clear direction on how the NDP is going to do this. They've done their consultation and they've introduced initial legislation, but they haven't written the question or even decided, like, are we picking a system? Are we picking from a list of systems? All kinds of things still in the air.
Yeah, we're, 10 months to go, basically, before the vote happens? And the clock's counting down here, and it's not a great sign that things haven't materialized on the yes campaign or what the province is wanting to do on this.
We run campaigns a lot faster in Canada than in the US. We don't spend 2 years talking about the next major election, but it's still going to be a pretty rushed debate for probably mostly the worse. You don't tend to get better debates when you rush them.
Well, the Ethics Commissioner released the first of, I believe, several reports into Bill Morneau this week. It's basically Mary Dawson's final report as the Ethics Commissioner. She released on her final day in office and basically cleared Morneau in the sale of shares of Morneau Chappelle in 2015. Now, this still leaves some of the other outstanding questions, particularly around Bill C-27, which was a pension reform bill, which had raised concerns regarding the fact that, Morneau Chappelle is a pension company, and it's not great if the minister has a vested interest in them doing well.
It sort of looks like the opposition, because some of these complaints were launched by Nathan Cullen and some by Pierre Poilievre. took a somewhat shotgun approach at Bill Morneau and said, well, this was awful, and this was awful, and this was unethical. Maybe one of those will stick. And so far, it's been, no, not really. This does come after Trudeau's scathing critique just before Christmas, which was a weird time to release a report on that. And I
weird.
And I highly recommend the latest episode of The Boys in Short Pants, who this is their bread and butter, talking about conflict of interest, act, and code and what the difference is. But it's good news for the Liberals at a time when they needed a bit to have Morneau get away on a couple of the counts, even if we're still waiting on the broader stuff around pension reform.
Yeah, so in addition to the sale of the shares in 2015, there's also was the complaint about the Bank of Canada's renewal of a contract with Morneau Chappelle, and that one also got dismissed. So yeah, well, it is some good news on the Liberals' part. There's still an open question here, and it still led to another news cycle talking about Bill Morneau's issues. So I guess it's a win in the sense that, yeah, the finance minister so far hasn't been found to have breached the ethics code, but it's not still a good position for them to be in.
Well, something that hasn't been going as well this week for the federal Liberals is the renegotiations over the North American Free Trade Agreement have been getting heated, to say the least. The federal government's ministers on trade, both Chrystia Freeland and the Trade Minister Philippe Champagne, have been raising all kinds of carrots and sticks around this, and mostly talking about how Canada's basically preparing for a possible US withdrawal from NAFTA. I guess there's going to be a potentially final round of NAFTA talks later this month in Montreal, after which no one's really sure what's going to happen. Canada and Mexico have been really annoyed at a lot of US calls. The US wants to see us scrap the independent disputes process. They hate our supply management, of course.
Well, that's actually reasonable on their part.
They also want to make a bunch more content requirements for automobiles, and they want to add a sunset clause to NAFTA to just blow it up after 5 years unless we can all agree to keep it. And that just means we keep doing this over and over again, which sounds like hell. And also is not a good way to ensure business confidence in your countries.
Yeah, and the markets hate uncertainty, so that clause alone could throw a huge wrench in things. It's the Trump administration. Who knows what the fuck they're going to do? It's going to be interesting to see how they go, but something to keep in mind is there's a lot of interest from, well, basically everyone who isn't Trump in the Republican Party and a good chunk of the Democrat Party in maintaining the trade agreement. And Canada's the largest market for, I believe, 30 plus US states. And then I think 15 of the other ones, it's Mexico. So it's one of those things where everybody is going to raise a stink about it. And there's an open question as to whether or not congressional approval's needed. So expect to see the whole thing cause quite a stink down south if Trump does go through with it.
And the other thing that happened this past week is Freeland announced that Canada has launched a, quote, wide-ranging challenge at the World Trade Organization over a number of the U.S. trade sanctions that have been put in place around softwood lumber. This made one paper say it mystified trade experts as to why we would decide to go this way.
The strategy is odd.
I guess Freeland's argument, as I discerned out of the statements, is Trump's a bully, you got to meet strength with strength, that kind of stuff. Like, we're not going to bend over for the Americans at this point. We're going to stand up and fight for our rights and try and defend our softwood lumber markets, which are the perpetual punching bag of trade in this continent. I have no clue how the WTO, the dispute resolution process, works to say how valid our complaints are, how likely they are to succeed. Not even close to anything I've read much about. But It's a bold strategy,
I believe we've generally done well when challenging softwood lumber in the past.
but it takes time, costs money, and in the meantime, forest workers' jobs are still at stake. And so I guess they had to do something, and John Horgan talked about how he was going to fight strongly for softwood lumber, and there actually isn't much he can do, so maybe he whispered in the federal government's ear, hey, do something.
Yeah,
or they just realized themselves they needed to.
And I suppose I should just be happy they're choosing softwood lumber, not Bombardier.
I'm British Columbia, Victoria is my capital, Canada's westmost province, touching the Pacific coast. And I have lots of mountain ranges, Whistler Mountain is my most famous. If you're looking to ski or snowboard, I have lots of these places.
Well, and to close off this episode, I wanted to create a new segment called The Best of #BCPoly. We spend far more time on Twitter than we ever intended to keep the show up, and we often come across some good witticisms out there, and I want to recognize some of those and hopefully generate more, not snarky partisan, but elevate the BC Poly hashtag that can sometimes be pretty hacky. So we came up with a handful of tweets that we're nominating as our favorites of this week. I saw Derek O'Keefe tweet yesterday, I believe, about the No BC PR Society that we mentioned in the quick takes. Bill Thielman and Suzanne Anton unite against proportional representation because it might give party insiders too much power. You can't make this up, in all caps at the end. You can follow Derek O'Keefe at Derek O'Keefe.
And on that PR topic, a tweet I particularly liked was from Gillian Oliver, who was quote tweeting Bill Tillman, of all people, when he was complaining that a party founded by former Nazis formed a government in Austria. And then her response was, when 1 in 4 Austrians vote for a party run by former Nazis, you have a Nazi problem, not a electoral system problem. #BCPoly. And she's at Jilly Oli.
The other two tweets we liked were both around Gregor Robertson's retirement. I like Tom Davidoff, who tweeted, sad to see at Mayor Gregor go, well-intentioned and open-minded. The bike lanes are freaking awesome. Thank you. And I can't tell how much snark or sass is in there.
Well, I will point out that when we recorded his interview, he did show up on a bike, so I'm guessing he gets a lot of use out of those bike lanes.
Yeah, it might be genuine. It might be sincere. You can follow Tom at Tom Davidoff.
And finally last night, there was some fireworks happening in Vancouver for some reason that I never actually found out.
Apparently there was a conference on at Canada Place that just put fireworks on, as you do.
Yeah. Anyway, in response to the unknown fireworks and the announcement yesterday of Gregor Robertson leaving politics was, I know some people don't like Mayor Robertson, but aren't the fireworks a bit much? #Vancouver. And that was by Steve Burgess, and you can follow him at Steve Burgess1.
If you want to nominate any tweets for next week's show, tweet them at us.
Let's say #BestOfBCPoly.
Sounds good. We'll look for that.
And that has been Politos. Find links to the stories we mentioned in the show notes at politos.ca. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at PolitosPod. Leave us a review and let us know what you think. Support the show and get early access to our interviews at patreon.com/Politos. And if you have ideas for the show, feel free to send them to us. Thanks for listening.